All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Roundabout Sports, presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media, where our passion is our profession. It is a warm February Wednesday night, February 21st, 2024. I'm the Maestro, Jeremy Karp, and we have quite an inspiring and special show in store for all of you this evening. I have the pleasure of welcoming somebody who I've gotten to know over the past couple weeks or so, and he, even before the show, he was sharing with me some more of his inspiring story. I'm going to be welcoming a former member of the St. Louis Football Cardinals of the Big Red, Mr. Luis Sharpe. And good evening, by the way, to Mr. Christopher Miles, who just commented. And yes, folks, send in your questions, your comments. Be sure to tune in. We are on Facebook, on X, on YouTube at Interstate 70 Sports Media. You can find us on Spotify, all streaming services. Let's face it. I'm gonna get that out of the way. If it's a streaming platform for podcasts, we're there. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I got to give a proper introduction. This gentleman, it was for a long time. He was a first round pick out of UCLA in 1982. He played from 1982 to 1994 for the St. Louis Football Cardinals and eventually the Phoenix Cardinals and then eventually the Arizona Cardinals. But he also played in the USFL back when it was actually decent. He was a three-time Pro Bowler. He was an all-rookie team member, and he was a second-team All-Pro in 1990. He played and started in 189 career games. And it's my pleasure to introduce to Roundabout Sports this evening, the one, the only, Luis Sharpe.
Jeremy, thank you for that very kind and gracious introduction. It is a great privilege to be with you on your show this evening.
Well, it is a pleasure to me. Whenever I get to interview somebody, it's always a pleasure. And this is definitely no different. So thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join me this evening. That it really means a lot.
I certainly appreciate that. And I'm curious to hear what we talk about. Some of the things that we discussed before the show, I think are very relevant in society we live in, and looking forward to talking about some very tough issues that we face in our world today.
Well, the first thing I have to ask you is, where did your love of football originate from? I mean, you played in the league 13 years, but and you were a standout athlete in UCLA, became a first-round pick. What were the humble beginnings of a guy born in Cuba coming to Detroit, Michigan? Where did that love of football originate?
I can remember one play in high school. I'll never forget. I was a sophomore in high school, and the football coach at Southwestern High School convinced me to come out and try for the football team. And I had no idea how to put my pads on in my pants. I had them backwards. I had street socks on, and all the senior players were laughing and teasing me. And I'll never forget, I was lined up across from the high school All-American on his way to Michigan, and had the All-State running back behind him. And that All-American, his name was Kyron Williams, and he was laughing at me, pointing at me. And I whipped him at the line of scrimmage, got into the backfield. I hog-tied the All-State running back, slammed him to the ground. And for the first time in my young life, I realized that I had something on the inside of me that was extraordinary. And of course, from that point forward, I became a high school All-American, got a scholarship to UCLA, went on and played professionally. But that one play, I think, signified my career as a football player.
Okay, and like I said, you became that standout guy, got the scholarship at UCLA. Before you found your knack for football, what was it that you thought you were going to do, that you thought you were going to pursue in life?
Well, we came here from Cuba. I was 5 years old, my brother and I, and didn't speak one word of English. Didn't know anything about the culture. And again, we were teased, we were chased home from school because kids can be mean when you're different than the
Right.
norm in society. And so my thought was, I just wanted to be a good young man. I wanted to graduate high school. My father worked at Ford Motor Company, which he retired after 32 years. Rest in peace to my dad. But I just wanted to be a productive, law-abiding member of society. Never really had any aspirations of playing any sports until of course, I got involved in high school in football and I played a little baseball. And then, when I saw the gifts and the talents that I was blessed with and what I could do on the football field, then that opened up an entire new avenue for me.
Okay. Now, what was it like when you when you got the announcement on draft night that, hey, I just became a first round pick for the St. Louis Cardinals? What was that feeling like?
Oh, it was the greatest feeling in the world. But interestingly enough, the Cardinals that year, 1982, they had selected Sean Farrell out of Penn State. That's who they wanted with their 16th pick in the first round. However, Sean Farrell threatened that if they drafted him, he would go and to med school and wouldn't sign with the contract with the Cardinals. So I
Oh
was
boy.
actually their second choice as their first round pick in the first round. Yeah, but of course, I was excited. I was excited to be selected as the 16th number overall pick in the first round. And I talked to Coach Hanny, and he told me about how badly they needed a left tackle and how offensively they were going to be one of the most. And of course, we were with Lomax and Roy Green, Earl Farrell, O.J. Anderson before he got traded to the Giants. We had one of the more explosive offense in the early '80s in the NFL.
What was your relationship like? Okay, so you get there, and I mean, you're part of an offensive line that has, Hall of Famer Dan Deerdorf. It's got Joe Bostic. I mean, it's got Randy Clark. I mean, well established players. And of course, you're blocking for Jim Hart and Neil Lomax, who recently just celebrated a birthday. What was your relationship like with this team starting out in your rookie season?
I tell you, I never forget when I first walked into the stadium, the training room there at Bush Stadium, my very first day, and I would go into the training room, and there sitting getting his ankle tapes is Jim Hart. Jim Hart was one of my hero quarterbacks as a young boy in this inner city of Detroit. I used to play Jim Hart when we played sandlot football. It was like a surreal moment. It was like a surreal moment. And of course, Dan Dierdorf, I'll never forget. Dan told me my rookie year sometime, I think it was, we were playing the San Francisco 49ers, and I was blocking against Hall of Famer Fred Dean. And Dan came up to me after that game and he says, you know what? You're going to be a great player in this league. And that really gave me the confidence to believe in myself. And I think was the impetus for me becoming a 13-year and three consecutive Pro Bowl player in the NFL.
I was gonna say it's not just that you were a three-time Pro Bowl. You were three straight years you got it. Now, 1985, you went to the Memphis Showboats in the USFL. What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, we were at a contract impasse with the Cardinals, and the USFL was an upstart league, and they needed a tackle. So my agent negotiated with them, with the Memphis Showboats, and signed a contract. Went and played the summer there with the Showboats. Got to play with the great Reggie White. Became good friends with Reggie and his wife Sarah, and then came right back that fall to play in the NFL season.
Okay, so it's which was the case for a lot of NFL players. I know the USFL tried to compete with the NFL, but it was just financially and just especially with the networks, it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, it
Um,
wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't meant to be, and they kind of were spending out of control, trying to bring talent from the NFL to the USFL. But I had a good experience, a fun experience there in Memphis. Played with the great Reggie White, as I mentioned, and I got to play with Pepper Rogers, God rest his soul, and loved the city of Memphis. So it was an overall good experience for me.
So, especially when it comes to the St. Louis Football Cardinals, it's interesting because there's a lot of great players, a lot of Hall of Famers, and a lot of great memories. Unfortunately, they're also known for only making the postseason 3 times, never hosting a home playoff game. I guess what I want to ask is, I mean, even though the team never really did a whole lot in the postseason, what did that time with and this goes into Phoenix when you were in the Phoenix/Arizona Cardinals. What did the time being in the Cardinals organization mean to you, despite their lack of postseason success?
What did the time mean to me? I tell you, and I posted something here recently. My wife, daughter, Rebecca, and I, we had the privilege of going to Vegas and participating in some of the Super Bowl events and activities. And I said, I would have given all three of my Pro Bowl appearances to be able to play on the main stage, the biggest game in sports, the Super Bowl. Just to play in one Super Bowl, I would have given up all three of my Pro Bowls. And so,
Okay.
in hindsight, regrettably, I feel some kind of way. Some of the personnel decisions that were made, I remember we let Jay Novacek go to the Dallas Cowboys. We let Tim McDonald go to the San Francisco 49ers. Ken Harvey went to, the personnel decisions, I think, had a lot to do why we never ascended and gave the fans the kind of football deservingly so. They're in St. Louis and in Arizona.
What was I guess here, this is one I have to just get out of the way. And because being a tackle, I mean, you played 189 games. That is a long time, especially for an offensive lineman. And I mean, this right here about sums up the just pure strength that you possessed as a player. Who do you consider the toughest defensive lineman you ever had to face off against in the trenches?
Well, Lawrence Taylor was not a defensive lineman; he was a linebacker.
Linebacker.
But he absolutely had to be number one, the greatest
Okay.
defensive player in the history of the NFL. And he actually changed the way offenses blocked, and he also made the left tackle next to the quarterback the most valuable offensive player on the team. Because if you couldn't block LT, you couldn't score points.
That is true. LT. Yeah, I was gonna say I could have just honestly said defensive player in general, and especially nowadays that a lot of linebackers are used as edge rushers. So you'll put guys like TJ Watt, who is listed as a linebacker. You'll put him at the edge rush position, in certain formations. LT, I think, was one of the innovators of that because, like you said, they had to change on offense how you would block because LT could just do it all.
Absolutely, absolutely. He was a game wrecker, and we had to pay attention and know exactly where he was on every single play if we were to be successful and score points against that vaunted giant defense.
Oh, absolutely. What was probably what do you feel was the worst injury you suffered? It's hard to go unscathed in the NFL, let alone football in general. I've learned that the hard way, unfortunately. What do you consider probably the most severe injury you had to endure over those 13 years?
It had to be the career-ending injury. I tore my medial meniscus ligament against the Philadelphia Eagles, November of 1994. And that pretty much ended my career. That did end my career. So I would say that had to be the most serious injury that I had.
Okay. Was it just something that they said that you couldn't come back from, or did you feel, I've done enough in my career to where?
Yeah, I mean, I had an opportunity to come back. There were several teams that called and were inquiring about my rehabilitation and wanting to bring me in to see how I recovered. But I was at the end of 13 years in the NFL, and I felt like I couldn't be a top-notch tackle any longer, recovering from that injury, plus the years that I had played. So I just decided to hang it up at that point.
Okay. Um, so now we're gonna kind of get into the deeper meanings of things. This is where we're going to get into the deep talks of life. And folks, for you, if you're just tuning in, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to Roundabout Sports on the Maestro Jeremy Karp, alongside football great Luis Sharpe, former St. Louis / Phoenix / Arizona Cardinal. Um, I have to ask, one thing that it's not something that's pleasant to be known for, but you did battle a lot of drug and alcohol addictions over the course of your career in the NFL and post. The first thing I have to ask is, where did the drug addiction come from? Where did it begin?
Well, it began, I would say it began probably when I first entered into the NFL. And it was pretty prevalent my rookie season. Uh, and not only my rookie, not only in it, but in the some of the combines. I think that's where I got started. Was at one of the combines. I was introduced to it, and of course it continued through my rookie year and pretty much through my NFL career. Um, and so, yeah, that to answer your question, it probably began early on during the combines, my rookie season with the Cardinals in St. Louis.
I know, cocaine was one of the notable things you had become addicted to. Was it something that was, the coaches took really paid attention to? And, you know, I think the best way I'm trying to describe it is, what repercussions did you possibly face from the team because of it?
Well, let me just say that, the disease of addiction, the disease that we all suffer from, expresses itself in ways that are antisocial, and it makes detection, diagnosis, and treatment difficult. So, for the most part, I was pretty much able to hide it, and I was pretty much a functioning addict because I didn't uh, get involved with substances during the season. I was too concerned about maintaining my level of play. Um, so, it is, like I said, it expresses itself in ways that are antisocial. And because of it, detection, diagnosis, and treatment of the disease of addiction is oftentimes very difficult.
Um, at what point, and of course, it took you a long time to not only, I think admitting it is one of the hard, if not the hardest thing to do when it comes to having an addiction. And it took a while for that admittance to come true. Well, on top of that, I have to ask, I mean, what happened to you as a result of this addiction, and what made you realize and admit, hey, I have a problem. I need to get this under control?
Oh, the idea that some way, somehow I could control and enjoy my using of drugs is the great obsession of every addict, whether it be an alcoholic, whether it be someone that's addicted to meth or addicted to cocaine. That idea that some way, somehow you can control it and enjoy it is the great obsession. And, the interesting thing is that the persistence of that illusion is absolutely astounding. The fact that I'm 60, I'm going to be 64 in June, and I got clean at the age of 57. The fact that I went 57 years thinking that I can control and enjoy using substances is absolutely astounding looking back on it. And they say that many pursue it into the gates of insanity and death. until I admitted, like you said, I had to admit to my innermost self that, you know what, I got a problem. I got a problem. I am an addict and I can't do this alone. I need the help. I need treatment. I need therapy. I need fellowship. I need counseling. I need education. I need spirituality. So many different components that go into recovery.
It's interesting you had brought that up because for me, a few years ago, around the time I first started going to my support group that I go to, I was at an extremely low point in my life. I didn't even, there was a lot of times that I would just kind of try to drink the sorrows away. And I would, one of my friends would try to invite me to their softball game or something, and I just wouldn't even physically have the strength to just get out of bed. I wouldn't want to do it. And finally, I don't know what it was, but there was just something just snapped. And I said to myself, because I always had tried to say to myself, I can handle it myself, or I can suppress it and I can just shake it off. I mean, that's what I got to do. I can't let other people worry about me. And finally, something just clicked in my head to where I'm like, I can't do this alone. And if I don't go somewhere and get help, you know, the good Lord only knows what would have happened. But I knew, like, I wanted to be alive. I love living. And it was just a matter of how about to go about getting better.
Mhm.
Um, and
Yeah,
I think that is definitely the most difficult sequence of events that you can do on the road to recovery, no matter what it is, no matter what you suffer from. Because, like you said earlier, addiction is a disease that takes many forms,
yeah,
and it's a very hard diagnosis because it's suppressed so much.
yeah, absolutely. And you said a key thing, and I talked about that, the illusion and the obsession. The only way that we can overcome those illusions and obsessions is we have to admit to our innermost self that I have a problem. I am a drug addict. I have a problem, and I can't do this alone. And that has to do with surrender, which in our program is we admit to ourselves that we are powerless and our life is unmanageable. Until we get that, the recovery process can't begin.
And for those that are tuning into the audio visual, like on our YouTube and Facebook Live and Twitter Live versions, on the bottom of the screen is the SAMHSA National Helpline at 1-800-662-4357 for drug and alcohol related. And it's a confidential helpline 24/7, 365. It's 366 on a leap year like this year. But the line will be there for the line's always available. But I'm gonna have it on the ticker on the bottom of the screen for a while on this show. Luis, I want to ask you next. I mean, we kind of know where the story goes, but it's how you got there that's all the more inspiring. So I have to ask, once you admitted to yourself that, hey, I have an addiction, I have a problem, I don't want to end up like contemporaries that I've seen succumb to those problems. How did you go about overcoming your addiction?
Well, I think I had to go into inpatient treatment, um, and I had to learn about the disease of addiction and understand that it's not a moral issue. We are not hopelessly bad. We are people that are critically ill, and we have to overcome the stigma. As we talked earlier, it's okay to not be okay. Just because I was a big bad football player, three-time All Pro, what I'm saying, doesn't mean anything. I had to surrender. I had to admit to my innermost self that I got a problem, that I am an addict, right? An addict is very simply a man or woman whose life is controlled by drugs. It says that we are in the continuous and progressive illness whose ends are always the same: jails, institutions, and death. And so I had to admit that I was headed in that path. I was headed in that path to losing my mind or ending up in jail for the rest of my life, or possibly even dying as a result of my addiction. And when I personally, deep down inside, came to that realization, I was ready to surrender and accept the help that I needed.
And I mean, for your first go through of all this, you had mentioned to me before the show, we always talk about second chances in life. Sometimes, though, it's not just a second chance, it's a third chance, a fourth chance. Some people are fortunate enough to have those. And, how long did your first. I mean, I've always been taught that the road to recovery is truly never ending. That's actually what I've been. And I get it, because it's something that I've dealt with for a long time and I've only just gotten help for it for a few years. But I guess how long did the treatment program originally for you go for?
Yeah, and it is a never-ending road. I still go to my 12-step meetings, and I still practice on a daily basis the tools. The tools is giving back. What I'm doing here tonight, sharing honestly and openly about my story, so that hopefully somebody listening will get some hope and inspiration that, you know what, if he came from where he came if he's now a productive and law-abiding and responsible member of society, so can I be. That's how we get out of our self-absorption, self-centeredness, ego, pride. We do it by giving back what's so freely been given to us. But it is a lifelong process. And addiction is not just about drugs, it's about behaviors. It's about behaviors that
Yep.
we have to learn what those are and be willing to make changes so that we can continue on this road, this destiny towards staying clean and sober for the rest of our lives.
I know that tell the story about. Now this goes to about, I believe it was November of 1995. And you're still fighting those battles. Your football career's been over, but you're still fighting the battles, the road to recovery. Um, Tell me the story kind of about Roy Green and Larry Lee helping you get the help you still need or needed at the time.
Well, it was a time when I wasn't ready to receive the help because again, my mind was so clouded. Again, as I mentioned, thinking that someday, somehow, I can control and enjoy my using. So what happened was Larry Lee, a college teammate of mine, and Roy Green, they got with my wife and they devised a plan to put me to sleep, put me in the back of a Suburban, and they drove me from Phoenix to Betty Ford Clinic in Palmdale, California. And they drove me there. They dropped me off, and the very next day, I caught a cab all the way from Palm Springs, where Betty Ford was located, all the way back to Phoenix, Arizona. I don't even remember what the cost was, but that's an example of the insanity of the disease of addiction, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
I was gonna say, and I probably was a few hundred dollars if that's the distance for a cab. But if I remember correct, I mean you had multiple. This was not just a battle within yourself. This was a battle with the law. This was, legal troubles as well that were starting to affect the outside while your internal struggles were happening. I mean, you had, I believe, 8 or 9 felonies, went to jail multiple times. And, eventually all this led to you um, working at the Salvation Army rehab in South Central Phoenix, um, and as a preacher in the gospel. Take us through how that all came about. I mean,
I went through the Salvation Army program and I did very well. And I started driving a truck. They needed a resident manager. So they hired me as resident manager, 90 inpatient uh, patient facility, and I was doing well. Of course, I relapsed after that and went back to prison. So obviously, I was not working a program of recovery because I went back to what it is that I was doing and got the same result. Went straight back to prison. Um, but it wasn't until 2017 that I feel I reached my bottom, and that's what's worked. And as I said, it's all about surrendering. It's all about realizing that we basically are when we continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. That obsession and that illusion that one day we can control and enjoy our using. It really is the definition of insanity, and the only way we can get rid of that is by admitting to our innermost selves that we have a problem and we need help.
How much did, and we talk about how much it affects us, how much addiction, behavior, and things of that nature, does to us, behavioral wise, legal wise, it does so much damage, but it also begins to damage the people around us. Um, what, what was you and your family at the time of what you consider your lowest point? What was
Addiction affects every area of our lives. It affects us mentally, it affects us physically, socially, relationally. It affects every area of our lives. And I'm no different than you or any other person that is addicted to substances. But I can tell you this. If I had written down my list of expectations, before I started this process 7 years ago, I would have seriously disappointed myself. You know why that is, Jeremy?
why is that?
Because hopeless living conditions have been joyously changed today. I have reconciled with my children, with my family. Today, I have my self respect and my dignity back. Today, I'm traveling across the country and I'm sharing a message of hope and promise of freedom. Today, I own my own home. Today, I got a wife. Today, I'm a productive, law abiding, responsible, tax paying member of society. You know what that does for me? That tells me that my addiction is arrested and that now anything is possible. Anything is possible.
And it's one of the most inspiring things to hear somebody, and you've been clean for, well, I believe 5+ years now.
It'll be 7 years in a couple of months.
Yeah. And
It'll be 7 years in a couple of months.
congratulations are an absolute, like, in order for that. That is such a blessing to hear. I'm so happy for you on that.
Let me just say, it is a blessing. But let me just say this: if I can do it, Jeremy, so can you, and so can anybody else out there listening that may be struggling with the same issues, the same struggles that I had. They can do it too if they're willing to put in the work.
Absolutely. We get to now I guess, if you will, the second issue. That being, it's probably one of the most common issues of all ex-football players, and that's brain injuries. You had stated in an interview that not too long ago you had started to notice issues with your short-term memory and started enduring constant headaches. Um, and look, you played 13 years in the NFL. Add on multiple years in college at UCLA. I mean, that right there is at least 17 years of football in your life at the collegiate to pro level. And not to mention everything else that's gone on in your life. Um, I mean, do you feel that, how do I word it? Okay, here we go. Do you feel that you might have CTE?
I don't believe that I do have CTE. I will never make that confession. I will tell you that I do have some issues.
Okay.
that are similar to what people describe are related to repetitive head trauma, which we all had, playing in the years that I played in the NFL.
Okay.
One of the things I do, my brain, I work my brain by meditating the scriptures. I work my brain by writing things out, things like a lot of the things that I'm sharing with you guys today, the things that I've learned in my recovery process. I exercise regularly. I eat healthily. I get proper rest. I spend time with my wife and my family. So I believe that I do a lot of things that ameliorate the effects of repetitive head trauma, and that's why I'm able to have a normal, intelligent conversation with you this evening.
And it's been nothing short of amazing. And so I wanted to ask you about your community outwork. I mean, this is not just a local centered community type of group that you do. You know, this is, I mean, you just told me at the beginning of the show that and that you were just in Vegas participating with your wife with I guess festivities regarding the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of the community outwork that you do, helping people that struggle, whether it be with mental health conditions such as myself, people that struggle with addiction, you know, alcohol abuse, whatever the case may be. Be sure to delve into some of that.
Yeah, well, my daughter and I, we are ambassadors with the Hall of Fame Health. Hall of Fame Health is an initiative that works to uh, reduce stigma, uh, normalize conversations, and transform culture surrounding mental health and substance misuse. And as you and I
Okay.
were talking, yeah, as you and I were talking earlier, our motto is that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about, and one of the things I had to do in my recovery process, I never forget, I was labeled as a football hero to crackhead zero in the local newspapers, and the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment that caused. For a long time, I wouldn't talk about it, but I had to meet with a psychiatrist, a mental health professional, and I got to talk about some of those things. And now, I'm open about it because I've talked about it and I've overcome that. So now I can help others. So my daughter and I, as ambassadors, we travel with Hall of Fame Health across different NFL cities, and we partner with Hall of Fame Health or Hall of Fame NFL players, and we have panel discussions and we auction off football items, and we raise monies to provide services for those that need those services but can't afford them. That, along with sharing my story, as I'm sharing with you, of being an overcomer, of admitting powerlessness and unmanageability, and of demonstrating to people that recovery is possible to those that want to put the work in.
How were you able to continue that community work through the pandemic?
Oh well, the pandemic that shut everything down.
Yeah.
That shut, and I continued my recovery because we would have phone meetings by telephone or by way of Zoom. So we stayed connected recovery wise through technology, through Zoom and phone calls.
Well, wonderful. What is, and I know that you have other engagements, so I mean, I'll take a few more minutes of your time. This has been just an absolutely wonderful occasion to be having the pleasure of interviewing you. It's almost kind of picking your brain because there's so much inspiration that you've passed on to not only myself but everybody that's tuned in, and that's been the goal of it, you know. And if have people come to you and sought your counsel and advice when it comes to their path to recovery?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's one of the way I get to keep what I have, Jeremy, is I give it back. I give it back. That negative sense of self that I once had when I was using has now turned into a positive concern for others. You know, I see where God brought my life from, and how at peace and content I am with my life today, and the fact that I no longer have the obsession and the compulsion to use drugs. Man, I want other people to get it, because I know if I can be here and if I can do it this long, so can others. And so, what I thought was my greatest curse has turned into my greatest blessing because of my desire to give this away, this gift that I've been given, this gift of life. I want to share with other people.
I think what's the biggest takeaway is that, I mentioned earlier how you had witnessed many of your contemporaries succumb to the things that you struggled with. I mean, we hear about those types of stories all the time of football players dying young because of drug abuse, trouble with the law, things of that nature. And, here you are, you said you're about to be 64 in June, and you're keeping yourself going strong and making sure others don't have to go down the path you did to get where you're at today.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely. And if you look at the statistics, I don't know what they are, but the numbers of fentanyl and opioid overdoses, especially amongst our youth, are astounding. And I've lost several members in the program that I attend, Narcotics Anonymous, young men that made one bad choice, one bad decision, and they're no longer with us because of fentanyl. So it is, a heartfelt message that I have, because I've experienced it. I've seen the devastating effects on families as a result of the numbers, the increasing numbers, the astounding numbers of overdoses across this nation.
I know and this is based from the 2021 statistics that I have from the CDC, but over 106,000 people died from a drug overdose in 2021. Since 1999, Louise, over 1 million people have died in the United States alone because of drug overdoses. And I mean, and it's not obviously just opioids or fentanyl, but those have started to be on the rise, unfortunately. Um, and, recovery programs, their main goal is to find that renewed spirit in each person and to prevent them from becoming one of those statistics. The last thing you want to be is one of those 1 million people, you know?
And the thing is, it's now you're playing Russian roulette. You're playing Russian roulette with this fentanyl. Just such a small amount can take you out. So the drug game, the drug use now, it's a lot more serious, I believe, than it was 10 or 15 years ago. You literally are playing Russian roulette when you involve yourself in illegal substances.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
Louise, before I let you go, I just have one last question for you.
shoot.
Uh, what is the biggest piece of advice you can give to everybody listening and to anybody in general?
Well, the biggest piece of advice, I mean, from a football professional standpoint, I would say never let anyone have power over your thinking. I know that when I got drafted number one, I had cynics, naysayers. I wasn't big enough. I was an unknown coming out of UCLA. I would last only 3 or 4 years. I use that as fuel to propel me to the levels that I reach as an NFL player. So always believe in yourself. Never let anybody have control or power over your thinking. Do the work, do the work, do the studying that's necessary. And always speak light, speak positively about whatever your dreams, desires, aspirations to become. I'll never forget because I played with the Cardinals and we were a perennial loser. The news media would come to me and you're playing the New York Giants. You guys are playing in New York, the Giant defense. How are you going to score? They're Super Bowl champions. And my response would be absolutely. I have tremendous respect for Lawrence Taylor and the Giant defense. But you know what? They put their pants on just like I do, just like we do, and we're well prepared. And we expect to go out there and we expect to score points and come out on top of that football game. Always speak positively over your life. Never let the negativity of the world influence how you see yourself and how you speak about yourself.
I love it. I absolutely. Well, Louise, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join me this evening.
Thank you,
And
Jeremy, for having me. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for shedding light on an all important subject in our world today. And I pray and believe and hope that there are some people listening to your show that heard our message today and know that it's available to them too. They don't have to be bound to the disease of active addiction.
absolutely. Louise Sharpe, ladies and gentlemen, on Roundabout Sports. You take care, and I'll talk to you later, my
All
friend.
right. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate you. Have a good evening.
You as well. Thank you. One absolute pleasure was having Luis on this evening, folks. And we're going to wrap it up here on Roundabout Sports by starting with the NAMI helpline at the bottom of your screen. It's available 24/7, 365. Just call it 1-800-950-NAMI, 1-800-950-NAMI. It's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for those who struggle. And of course, we always end the show by putting up the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is for that, you dial 988. The line's open 24/7, 365, 366 on leap years. Understand you're never alone in this world. There's always somebody out there who cares about you, loves you. If Luis's story proves anything, it is that exact phrase that you are never alone. And you're just the help you need is just a phone call, a text message, an email away, and you can be the listening ears for somebody else. You never know. Be sure to stick with Roundabout Sports next week. Over the next few weeks, of course, stick with us always. But the plan is in the future to have guests like Derek Thomas Jr., the son of the late great Hall of Famer Derek Thomas. We also plan on having in the future Ed Wheatley on the show, so we can talk about his book, St. Louis Sports Memories, Forgotten Teams and Moments from America's Best Sports Town. It's a fantastic book. Sheds light on just all the ins and outs of sports in St. Louis. And also hope to have some more surprise guests that I can't spoil just yet. But thank you all so much for tuning in this evening. And thank you, Louise, for sharing your inspirational message. I'm the Maestro Jeremy Karp, and always remember, life is a book full of empty pages just waiting to be written in. Make your